Planning Commission meeting. We will just go over a few items. This is recording live on the Comcast Local 20s, Channel 27, and on Pacific Coast TV's website. We do have a couple of community members in the audience, and we will give opportunity to those who would like to speak during the general public comments and then the specific item comments. Commissioner Ruddick will open and allow those sessions to occur. If you are on the phone, which I see one on the phone, *6 to raise and unraise your hand, and *9 to mute and unmute yourself. Otherwise, you have the tablet capability, or the icon capabilities to raise your hand on computers, iPhones, and tablets. Each person will be given 3 minutes, and there will be a timer. And then this evening, staff just mentioned, and we will mention it again live, that the Planning Commission did receive 3 public comments and a memo this evening via email. It is also located on the agenda this evening. So if you go to the website, the agenda on the bottom is correspondence, and that memo and the 3 comments are located there. I will now hand it over to Chair Ruddick to officially begin this evening's meeting.
Thank you, Bridget. I'll open this meeting of the August 10th, 2021 meeting of the City of Half Moon Bay's Planning Commission and invite everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Bridget, could you please do the roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Benjamin. Oh, yes, Commissioner Benjamin.
That would be me. I am here.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Sorry, I am present, but and no longer muted.
Okay, and Commissioner Gorin.
Here.
Vice Chair Polgar is absent this evening, and Chair Ruddick.
Here.
4 are present.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda tonight is the consideration of the minutes of the last Planning Commission meeting, which was July 13th of this year. Are there any discussion by commissioners of the minutes? Any edits?
I'm just going to add that Commissioner Ruddick did recuse himself. I did put abstain for the vote, but I just will add that sentence or comment that he did recuse himself.
Thank you, Bridget.
Mm-hmm.
If there is no discussion of those minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve them. Don't be bashful.
All right. So moved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Commissioner Benjamin,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez.
I
was
believe
absent.
I need to recuse myself. Yep.
Yes, you did. And Commissioner Ruddick.
Yes. Minutes approved.
Yes.
Next on our agenda, we come, as we do every Planning Commission meeting, to a section for general public comment. And we welcome comments from any members of the public in attendance on any matter they wish to address the commission on, other than the one on our public hearing schedule, which is next in order in this meeting. But if you want to comment on that application, please wait till we get to that item. But any other public comments we would welcome at this time.
Seeing none.
Yeah, we see none, so I won't open the public hearing at this point, and instead go to public hearing item 1A, which is an application for coastal development permit at the 909 Grandview Boulevard address. And Scott, I imagine you're going to present on that?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I'll go ahead and screen share and provide a little PowerPoint presentation to supplement the presentation. Let's see. Can everyone see this okay?
Yes.
Yes, it looks good.
Yes.
Okay, so the project involves the construction of a new two-story residence totaling 2,026 square feet. And it also includes an attached accessory dwelling unit, otherwise known as ADU, totaling 672 square feet. A partial street extension as well as sidewalk would also take place along the project frontage, as well as the merging of the two 25-foot wide lots. All improvements are designed in compliance with the zoning regulations for this particular zoning district, based off of the merged lots. And the permits requested include a coastal development permit and architectural review. Now, the noticing that's taken place for tonight's meeting item included 2 site postings, one for the CEQA document comment period, and one for this evening. And then we also published a notice in the newspaper, HMB Review, for tonight's meeting, and then sent out notices to all the neighbors within 300 feet and all occupants within 100 feet. This slide shows the story poles that were installed, let's see, 6 days prior to tonight's meeting. And then this slide shows the site and surrounding area, aerial photograph. And the project site is located at the end of Grandview Boulevard, within the Grandview Terrace subdivision. And seasonal wetlands do exist east of the site. And the site is zoned R1B2, which allows for single family residences. Now, a couple of things for the commission to consider: compliance with the development standards, design compatibility, coastal resource conservation standards, and then the CEQA document that's been circulated. This slide shows the proposed site plan that includes the building footprint as well as driveway. And what I did is I tried to emphasize the 100-foot wetland buffer that sort of skims the northeastern corner of the site. This slide shows the proposed front elevation facing Grandview Boulevard. And then the rear elevation facing Terrace Avenue area. West elevation facing Cabrillo Highway and the beach. Notice the solar system that's been designed into the house. And then the east elevation that includes the entrance to the accessory dwelling unit. Here's a rendering that shows the colors and materials. And then a little bit difficult to see on screen, but the actual colors and materials that have been selected for the new house. First floor plan with the accessory dwelling unit on the left there indicated in blue. And then the second story with 3 bedrooms, 1 master bath, 2 bathrooms, laundry upstairs. Section. And then grading and drainage plan. One thing to note is that no net off-haul of grading is anticipated with this project. And the detention basin has been sited outside of the wetland buffer within the front of the new residence. If any overflow during major storm situations would run into the storm drain system within Grandview Boulevard. In our engineering staff, they've reviewed this and are accepting, supportive of the approach for the grading and drainage. Also notice that the frontage improvements, I mentioned this earlier, that the street extension as well as sidewalk are outside of the wetland buffer. So that's only a portion of the site frontage. And we actually double checked with our fire marshal just to make sure that the fire district is okay with this approach, and they're in agreement that this gives them enough access to do what they need to do. So we're happy about that. Landscape plan, drought tolerant plants are included in the landscape plan and have been reviewed by the project biologist. Wetland appropriate plants are shown within the wetland buffer itself. One comment that came up is that split rail fencing is shown on the landscape plan within the wetland buffer. We are recommending that an additional condition of approval be added for plan modification to remove the split rail fencing within the buffer. And I've indicated that location in orange there. But besides that, split rail fencing is proposed along the wetland buffer, and then solid fencing within the backyard and the remaining sides. Now, a biological resource assessment was prepared and then updated to include a wetland delineation for this project, given that there was potential for sensitive habitat within the area. And the biological consultant recommended mitigation measures to reduce potential impact to bioresources to less than significant. That's what initiated the initial study preparation. And the report and wetland delineation was circulated for the 45 days, as well as the CEQA comment period. And seasonal wetlands were found within the area and are shown on this map in purple, or I guess it's more of a dark blue. The wetland buffer is also shown, and as you can see, it clips the northeastern corner of the property. This data was provided to the designer for the project, and he integrated the wetland buffer data into the site plan for the architecture. Now, previously to 2020, there was a biological resource assessment prepared in 2015 for a neighboring property. And we provided this report to the project biologist before they conducted their on-site research for the current bioresource assessment and wetland delineation. And as you can see, the wetland information on back in 2015 is roughly the same as what's shown in the report included with this project. Going back further in time, there was also a wetland delineation prepared in 2008 by a neighboring property owner, or by Live Oak Associates, contracted by a neighboring property owner. And questions have come up about the wetland number 4 indicated within this wetland delineation. And what I've tried to do is sort of zoom into this area on the top right-hand corner of the slide, the wetland number 4. And this wetland was identified based off of hydric soils within this wetland delineation. And you'll notice that there was no sample point within the wetland delineation. So there's some concern about whether or not this was valid. Again, we provided this to the wetland biologist or the project biologist who is logged in this evening, and he is available for additional information on this subject if the commission would like have any follow-up questions. Now, a little bit about the CEQA analysis. As I mentioned, the initial study was prepared by a CEQA consultant who is also logged in this evening. We circulated the initial study for 20 days. We did receive a few comments via email, and a response to comments was prepared and then attached to the initial study and draft mitigated declaration. So that was included in your packet as well. As Bridget mentioned, we did distribute a memorandum late this afternoon that provided some comments that were received on the project. We provided that to the commission with some responses, as well as answering some questions that came up. We recommend that the Planning Commission provide the applicant an opportunity to speak, take public comment, evaluate the merits of the project, and I would be happy to answer any questions. We also have the project biologist, the CEQA consultant, the city engineer logged in this evening. We're all happy to answer any questions that the commission may have. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Scott. What would you recommend? Should we hear from the applicant first, or should we have a round of clarifying questions now?
You know, if the commission has any clarifying questions, I'd be happy to answer. But I do think it would be good to give the applicant an opportunity to speak.
Very good. Commissioner Dorn, you have your hand up.
Hi. Hey, Scott. I have actually two questions. One was the wetland. So I'm not sure. Can you explain to me why the road is not like part, you know, the wetland buffer doesn't apply to extending that road? Because, you know, clearly that's important to extend that road. But why is that okay to build on? That's first.
Yeah, so regarding the road extension, the all-weather road extension to provide access to the house, the road extension would not extend into the buffer. It would be cut off right at the buffer edge. So, and that includes the sidewalk too.
Well, it goes right through it. Like in your picture, it goes right through it. So anyway,
So
I didn't understand it. It didn't look like it made sense to me.
I'd be happy to screen share again just to provide some clarification.
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah, there it is. It looks like it cuts through the road, but oh my.
Okay, so as you can see, the end of pavement stops just before the buffer edge.
Oh, so they're not going to build it right to the end of the property line?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
and we double checked with the fire marshal just to make sure that was okay
Okay.
for fire access.
Okay.
And the fire marshal confirmed that this would provide safe access for the fire department to to provide emergency access to the site.
All right.
And that includes the sidewalk too. That would end at the buffer edge.
Okay. And is there going to be is there some kind of fence there? Because this is like not supposed to be used, right? I assume that's where your fence is going to be. Is that right?
So on the subject property, yes.
but not on the road, right? I mean,
Correct.
it's not there now, so.
Yes, it would remain
Um,
as is.
So the other question I had is that you showed 3 different maps, 3 different wetland delineations. And so when you're marking off this circle to define where the wetland buffer is, which of the 3 maps are you using?
The most recent, which reflects
Okay,
what's
2020.
on the ground, at least in 2020.
Mhm.
And our normal practice is, normally a wetland delineation can be used up to, 5 years. And that's normally the cutoff when it needs to be updated.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Commissioner Benjamin, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Scott, I do have some questions for the biologist, but I think they're nitty gritty, so it might be better for me to wait. But I want to ask some more high level questions, if I might. First, I provided some written questions, and I was looking to see that they were incorporated into, that they were made part of the public record. Have they been made part of the public record in some way? I didn't see it in the updated memo.
so is that in reference to the emails sent today?
Yesterday, actually, but yes.
So to my knowledge, we did provide some answers within the memorandum that was distributed this afternoon.
Okay, I'm going to request.
But I don't think the emails that were sent were included with the memorandum.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll pick that one up later. In the one of the questions that I asked in that had to do with the distinction between the footprints that would exist if the single-family residence were developed first and then an ADU were subsequently developed. And I appreciate that the staff report talked about some ambiguity about how that's been interpreted from the state. But I'm not sure I understood how, whether it was moot in the sense that if it had been sequentially developed, the footprint for the SFR would be different in terms of conformance. And then there'd be some allowances for an ADU subsequently. Is that question still open?
We did provide some clarification in the memorandum, and I think I just saw Winter raise her hand, and maybe she can provide some clarity.
Well, thanks, Scott. If I understand, and maybe Commissioner Benjamin, if you could state your question one more time a little bit more fully. I'm trying to understand if you're asking about if the single family home were developed first and then there were an application for an ADU, would that, I guess I'm not totally following what the question is.
Right. So I appreciate that we're not in deliberation and we haven't heard from the public yet. So if I'm being general, it's because I don't want to suggest that I've drawn any conclusions about this.
Mm-hmm.
But hypothetically speaking, if our goal is to be, and I think our goal is to be respectful of the ADU ordinance and the leeway that it provides, acknowledging that that leeway does provide some limitations on the freedoms in other places that don't exist in the coastal zone with respect to our zoning ordinance. If the project were to be just an SFR initially, and so that project were not, didn't receive the flexible treatment that is afforded ADUs with respect to our zoning ordinance, and that were to be built. And then afterwards, an ADU were presented for what I would imagine is pretty ministerial approval in most respects. The question is, would the footprint in terms of its excesses over what the zoning ordinance would normally provide be different than what we have in front of us tonight?
Yeah, let me try and take a crack at that with just sort of a general statement about what the law is and how it could work in those two different scenarios. So if the application were just for a single family residence, then that building could fill up the entire lot coverage allotment for the residents, or the floor area ratios. And then if a subsequent application were submitted for an ADU, state law says that that has to be ministerially approved and could be up to 800 square feet. So that if they were done in succession, that's how that would work under the state law. Here we have them being proposed together, and the state law was fairly recently amended to attempt to bring in ADUs that are submitted at the same time as single family homes, but there's some ambiguity in that provision about what restrictions jurisdiction could put on it in terms of making sure that either all of it fits within the existing lot coverage or not. And so that's where the city's ADU ordinance comes in, and what has been adopted but still needs a second reading. So I guess it hasn't finally been adopted, it's halfway there, is an ordinance that would actually say that if the single family home and the ADU come in together, that needs to, the total coverage of those two units together has to comply with the city's lot coverage requirements. And that ordinance is, based on pretty new, it's our interpretation of what's allowed under this new state law, but it is not the most conservative interpretation of state law. And so, and that one will have to be confirmed, approved by the Department of Housing and Community Development. So with this project, which has come in kind of in the middle between when the state law was enacted and before the city's own ADU ordinance is final, we took a slightly more conservative interpretation of state law to say that the single family residence fits, complies with the lot coverage requirements of the city, and but the additional ADU, we basically treated it as if the single family home had been in existence, and then the ADU goes is provides extra coverage in addition to that. So Jill, I know you've been in the midst of this longer than I have, so please feel free to provide a clear explanation if you got it.
No, that was fine. I wanted to add a little bit more. This interpretation and our practice of state law, while we are in the limbo of not having a new certified ADU ordinance that complies with state law, is not coastal dependent. I know Commissioner Benjamin, I heard you make a reference to some of the allowances that are provided for in the coastal zone. This is actually not related to that at all. This is an interpretation that any other city would be faced with making. And with this particular case, we note that it's one that's kind of coming through in this little window of time between our 2018 ADU ordinance and the one that's coming forward. That said, I think you were getting at this with your question, and I want to make sure we answer it. If the house was proposed, as Winter noted, even to max out the FAR and the lot coverage, but if it was just proposed as it is without the ADU and it was approved, the ADU could come behind at the size that you're seeing it now. In fact, it could come if this project met lot coverage and FAR limits for our code of the day, the way our proposed ADU code is coming forward. This particular applicant could come back and seek an addition to the ADU that would fall within under that state law provision and would be consistent with our pending ADU ordinance. So it would have the same outcome. We just would have a different process if our ADU ordinance is, one, if it's certified by the Coastal Commission, and two, if it's found to be acceptable by HCD.
So I'd like to apologize for my dog's enthusiasm. She's found something out in the creek to talk to. Let me try to, I'll shut the window right after I pick a couple of elements just to rejoin on this. The first is the staff report says slight excess above floor area ratio and lot coverage. We had comments from the public about the proximity of the building to the existing built out property. So one of my questions is, if there hadn't been an ADU, would there be any difference in the setback for just the house? Because presumably after that, the ADU would go in on the side that it in fact is going in on the east side. And so maybe I'll start with that question. Is that, have I framed it all right for you?
Yeah, so in regard to setbacks, it wouldn't change anything as far as the neighboring setback line, which is
Right.
6 feet. So
Okay, so there was a reference to substandard after the lot merger, and I think that it's possible that there was some question about whether there was some allowance on the setback. So I wanted to try to clear that up. On the floor area ratio, it sounds like there wouldn't be a difference if it went in initially and then we added an 800 feet afterwards.
that's correct. So,
Okay, and with respect to floor area ratio, again, no difference. Okay.
yes.
Okay, let's see. I appreciated the adjustments in the fence line that you spoke about earlier. At one of the recent meetings, I believe it was the, excuse me, the discussion on the Hyatt Hotel, we had, and it actually appeared in the minutes. It was an amendment to the minutes of a prior meeting. We talked about the idea of conditions that would make those notifications of buffers memorialized, that they'd be permanent. Was any consideration given to doing that here? And if so, if not, why not?
So we did add a condition of approval, sort of emphasizing the requirement. I don't. So I think there was some consideration. Winter?
And
There was, we'd like the city attorney to address this. There certainly was consideration.
And I apologize for my delay. I was trying to find the place in the agenda packet with the little table of compliance with zoning requirements. So if the question is, was there consideration for imposing a condition of approval that would, on top of the condition that Scott just mentioned, also require the applicant to record some kind of deed restriction? We did talk about it. Oh, so what is your question?
Well,
Sorry.
that's an interesting question. You can follow it, but I had a different question.
Okay, sorry, could you repeat that? I apologize.
Yeah, no, so it's interesting to ask that question, but I wasn't going to go there in preliminary discussion. It was more of a broad, more of a general question of having a marker that would require the identification of the fence to be a riparian buffer, and that there are restrictions that would be permanently maintained on the property. I hadn't
Like a physical marker.
I had not gone quite as far as deed recording, but I'd be interested in your opinion on both.
Well, I think the question about whether there were discussions of having a physical marker on the property, either Scott or Jill would be in a better position than me to answer. I don't know if Scott, that was the question you did answer and say, did provide an answer to.
Yes, now I did mention that split rail fencing would be added along the wetland buffer edge. So that would be a physical marker on the ground indicating the, where the wetland buffer is. And as approved with the project, a landscape plan would need to be modified if necessary. So
I feel like I feel like I'm getting into minutia on this. My goal, I appreciate that there's a fence. The question was, different people could interpret a fence differently. And the solution that was discussed at that Hyatt review conversation was a little interpretive plaque that was attached to the marker that said, this land is to be protected in perpetuity as a buffer. And so it's not so much about the fence. Fence is great. It's about the marker. That was my question. But I feel like I've gone beyond the scope of preliminary questions, so I apologize for that. Let's see. You answered the question about the fire turnaround. Did you want to speak? Would you be willing to speak, Winter, about the deed restriction element that you started into? Or since you've already started, we may as well go there.
Yes, so we did have conversations about an additional condition of approval, and the recommendation out of the city attorney's office was that the condition that's currently there effectively serves that purpose and is an enforceable and permanent condition on the property without a recorded deed restriction, and carries with it a stronger support in case there's any potential concerns or challenges than requiring an applicant to, convey a conservation easement or other deed restriction. So.
Okay, thank you. I understand. I'd like to turn to the utility requirements. I noticed that, it used to be, and it's been a while since I focused deeply on these, when we talk about a project having all of its utility hookup requirements met, we would typically see a will serve letter from the water district, and we'd see that it had its connections for sewer. And in this case, if I read the note correctly, I think it said it will need sewer and that a 5/8 inch connection is needed for the project. I'm assuming that there's not a problem with the utilities here providing those services. Yes?
yes, that's correct. So we've
Okay.
double checked with the water district as well as public works staff to confirm that utilities are available for the site.
Okay, that's great to know. I noticed and I appreciated the solar on the roof. When I read the HCD guidelines for ADUs, and one of the, in the frequently asked question area, there was a discussion of whether solar could be required in the ADU space, and the answer was yes. And so my question is this solar consistent with our requirements with respect to solar that they're referring to, or is this just something that they wanted to do that has no bearing on that FAQ response that we got from HCD?
Yeah, so as you know, the solar systems are a requirement per the building code now. And what we did is we routed the plans to our building official to double check and make sure that the solar system was adequately sized that will be required for both the single family residence and the ADU. And our building official confirmed that that was the case, that the solar system is large enough to meet the requirement for both the ADU and the residence.
Okay, thank you for addressing those questions. I can come back and pick a few of those up again later, but I'd like to yield right now, Chair. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hernandez.
Well, it's been a lively discussion so far. I'd like to follow up on a couple of questions that I have related to Commissioner Benjamin's questions. So the maximum floor area ratio is based on the lot size, not on the buildable amount of the lot size. Is that correct? So I know there's a riparian setback in part of the lot. So when we look at the 5,000 square feet, it's probably 15% of it is, looking at eyeballing it, about 15% of it looks like it's in the wetland. That's also included in the buildable space. Is that fair? Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, so what we go off is the merged lot size. So after the merger of the two 25-foot wide lots, the floor area ratio and lot coverage are based off the merged lot size. And that's consistent with what the assessor's office uses for assessing the property for property tax.
So, but the wetland has no bearing on that. Like the wetland setback has no bearing on that, even though it's not buildable.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. It's even the wetland area is included in the lot size that's that the assessor's office looks at.
Okay.
So
then the next question I have is, and I understand taking a conservative approach to things from a property rights perspective. So for the project before us, not some hypothetical set of things that could come separated from the project before us, we don't have an obligation to approve something that's over the 35% ratio for lot coverage. Is that correct? Like we don't have to approve it as a planning commission. It's just an interpretation that city attorney's taken to be conservative. But as a project before us, we could say, look, the maximum lot coverage is 35%. Is that fair?
I don't completely understand your question.
So the lot coverage in this project is 36.8%. The maximum lot coverage in a normal project would be 35%. So the recommendation here is to allow a greater lot coverage than what is normally allowed for a project.
So we touched upon this earlier that the the project conforms to the requirements for lot coverage and floor area, and state law allows for the ADU to exceed the 35% in floor area, 35% lot coverage and floor area. So in this case, and maybe Jill and Winter, you might provide some backup information on this, but a floor area exception or variance isn't needed in this case because the project conforms to state law.
Yeah, and if I can weigh in, I mean, I think as I attempted to say earlier, it's a little bit complicated, so I might not have been at my clearest, but we are taking a more conservative approach with this proposed project because then the city is with its ADU ordinance. And that is in part because the ADU ordinance process has to go through an HCD approval process. And right now we don't have that HCD approval. So yes, you are correct, Commissioner Hernandez. This is our slightly more conservative interpretation and approach until that ordinance works its way up and we get the blessing from HCD that the less conservative interpretation is consistent with state law.
And under the less conservative proposal that we have before HCD, where would we land on this project? Would we land within the 35% and the 50%? Yeah. Okay. Okay, those are all the questions I have on that for now. why do we allow wetland studies to be completed in July and August when it's not wet? I've been to this lot before and I've seen sitting water nearby. I don't know exactly where it was. It's hard to say, but can we just get a general comment as to why we allow wetland studies in August and July? As this one was
So
conducted?
I had that same question before the wetland delineation was prepared. And I think the biologist is better equipped to answer that. They basically, the answer that I was given was that there was enough moisture and plant growth on the ground to sufficiently conduct the wetland delineation. And I'm not a biologist, so and they're one of our approved biologists that do great work, and so we authorize that.
Understood. Okay. So I have a follow-up question that I'll just put out now because it's related, and I'll give the biologist a chance to prepare. Did the biologist specifically test for hydric soils in area number 4 that was identified from the study from 2012? That's the question that I'd like to understand. So we can leave that for the biologist to come to when the biologist gets to their parts, but that's it. Those are the only questions I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Scott, I had one clarifying question. Would you mind please showing the slide that shows the map indicating the so-called study area 4 from the oldest wetlands
Certainly.
study? I was having trouble fixing in my mind where that is compared to the property we're considering tonight. Sorry to make you go through that again, but
Yeah, hold on one second here.
I probably should have asked you when you had the slide up originally.
Okay, so this is the, what's shown on screen is the 2008 wetland delineation. And the field work was actually conducted in 2006.
And I see that study area number 4, but I can't tell where that is relative to the property we're talking about tonight.
So the subject property is roughly, well, you can see the edge of the existing pavement here, in with the white line with the black dot.
Okay,
Just
all right.
to put some reference. And
All
then
right.
the subject property actually includes, they're shown as 2 25-foot wide lots on this map.
And then in the top right of this slide is a zoomed in insert of that same.
Correct,
area.
yes.
Okay. So that's a small bit that is slightly southwest of the wetland delineated in the more recent studies. Thank you for that. That's helpful to me.
Certainly.
Commissioner Gorn?
Oh, hey, I just had one other question I meant to ask before. So it was about the height of the building. So you get there and it looks much bigger than everything else, but I'm not sure how much bigger it is. And I see that it's 25 and a little bit over 25 feet tall. But do you know how tall the other buildings are in that neighborhood? Is there anything that's 25 feet tall? Or are they all kind of around 20 is kind of what it looks like to me? Do you know that? That's my question.
You know, that a neighborhood survey of the height of all the two-story houses was not prepared. So I don't know the height of all the buildings, the two-story buildings in the neighborhood. I know that the house
Okay.
next door is slightly lower than the proposed house.
But we
That
don't
said
know
that-
how much lower, right?
Yes, the site is built up a little bit, is a little bit higher than the roadway, the actual pad of the subject property.
Mhm. Okay. Just trying to, it doesn't look like it fits with the character of the neighborhood, but I'm trying to get, I did drive around and see that there are other houses that are tall, but none of them look like 25 feet. So I just wondered if that was a
Yeah.
concern. of yours.
Commissioner Gorn, I think, as always, let's try to stick to clarifying questions at this point.
That is a clarifying question. I want to know. I'm wondering. I don't
No,
know.
I understand. And then you proceeded to express opinions about it. But in any case, Commissioner Benjamin.
Sorry, now I'm back. So there was another interesting thing in the conditions. We said that this is going to conform with the newly certified local coastal program. And I just want to be clear, sometimes we see projects that have reached a certain point in the development cycle. And then if there were a change in the policy, one might ask whether the project was too far down the pipeline to ask it to do conformance. But that is not the case with this project. We're asking it to meet the standards in the current LCP. If I understand condition 1 in Exhibit A, that this is going to conform to the April 15, 2021 LCP, right?
Yes, you are correct. Our new certified land use plan does apply to this project.
Okay. I know that in the work that has been presented in the environmental work for this study, we talked about that corridor having riparian vegetation. The reports of what was outside of the riparian area didn't include riparian stuff, but I saw Juncus, for example, listed in the riparian area. So it would appear to me that the setbacks relative to the riparian area would be the ones associated with riparian vegetation for this project. Is that correct?
I think that would be, the biologist would be better equipped to answer that question. I know there's some ambiguity as far as what percentage of riparian plants occupy a certain area to qualify as wetland.
Yeah,
And
again,
I think that's something
I appreciate
something that the
nuance.
biologist would probably be better equipped to answer.
The reason I brought it to your attention, and I'm happy, of course, to discuss it with the biologist, but when I read the report, it was quoting the zoning ordinance, not the new LCP. So I didn't want to put the biologist on the spot to be familiar with the new LCP requirements. In particular, I was looking at our current policy 6-49, I think it is, that calls for a larger buffer, 50 feet from the outer limit of riparian vegetation. And I hope I'm working off the right document. If I have it wrong, I'm very sorry. But I want to be sure I have clarity, since that's the document that we're trying to hold the project to be consistent with. And clearly ADU or not, coastal resources within the coastal zone receive deference with respect to our zoning. I think I've dwelled in the nuance enough, Chair. I think I'll get out of the way and look forward to hearing the applicant's presentation and anything that the biologists want to say that might shed light on the questions that have come up so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm cognizant of the fact we have members of the public who have their hands up and are eager to make public comment. I'm thinking it makes sense to go to public hearing next prior to the applicant and the biologist addressing us. Does that make sense? Okay, well, I will open the public hearing and ask Bridget to please do your usual excellent traffic control job.
All right, first up we have is Pamela Fisher.
Welcome, Ms. Fisher.
Whoops, okay. Moved over. All right.
Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting on. I don't want to hit it. It has a delay, so I don't want to push it and then. You can unmute yourself, Pam. Not seeing her responding. I'm gonna go ahead and just to keep things moving here. I'm gonna go on to the next one and then we'll see if we can get Pam back here in just a second.
Great.
The next person I have is Jill in pink. And you're unmuted, so you can go ahead.
Hi, sorry, this is my computer, but I'm actually here with the applicant. So it's because he couldn't log on to his computer with Zoom. So sorry about that.
Okay, let me see if I can get Pam to speak and then we'll come back to you guys.
Thank you.
Yep. Pam, are you there? You're not unmuted and I've clicked on it a few times, so. Yeah, I'm not getting any response here, so.
Through the
Oh, I
chair,
hate- I
we
hate to
could
close.
suggest Pam call in.
Mhm.
Yeah, if she needs to talk, I've tried to allow her to, and then she needs to unmute on her side, and it's not seem to be working both on panelist side and attendee side. So we can just kind of keep moving on, and if she would like to speak, I think we could accept that or honor that. So okay. So do
Yes,
we want to
if-
go with the applicant then? Are you guys ready to?
Well, if any other members of the public in attendance want to comment on this application, this is the right time in the meeting to do so. But I don't see any other hands raised.
Neither do
So,
I.
yeah, Bridget, I think your suggestion is a good one.
Okay. So Jill and Mr. Stebbins can go ahead and ask them to unmute. So when you're ready, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, can you see me?
No.
No, that's just as well then. Okay. Well, the only thing I can really talk about is the design of the house. And I always refer to it as four-sided architecture, meaning that there isn't a weak side. The building's fully articulated. And what I mean by that is that the massing gets broken up. Downstairs, I believe there's 13 inside and outside corners, which is what's used to break up the massing of the building, which
Oh my God.
is a lot. And then the second floor, I think.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Well, hello, I think
Sorry.
somebody's trying to speak.
Look like Pam, it looked like you unmuted and you're ready to talk. We'll catch you just in just a couple minutes here. Go ahead, sorry.
That's all right, that's all right. And then I wanted to talk about the setback that's to the neighboring property, and that is a 6-foot setback, whereas the neighboring property and most properties in the area are at 5 feet. So I exceed that. And then furthermore, the second floor steps back an additional 3 feet. So the second floor is 9 feet away from the property line. And then if you've looked at the elevation, you can see what the daylight plane does. But all of you spent quite a bit of time talking about the ADU and the coverage. But I'm proposing to scale it back to the 2,500 feet, which is what I had originally, and a bit of history. What you see before you tonight, that wasn't done. That was done last March, and I had conversations with Scott. And it seemed like with the state ADU law that I can increase the floor area ratio and the coverage. And he agreed with that. And so that's why I proceeded with that. But anyway, so it's not a sticking point or an issue. I will take that back down to 2,500 square feet total. Also, in doing that, there would be 1 foot in width that would come out off of the ADU, which I believe would allow me to slide the house 1 foot farther away from the existing house. And it would also have an impact on any windows and privacy to the house next door. It would eliminate 2 windows, so there'd only be 2 windows on that side. And those windows can be tucked up high and reduced in size. So it would be a 2020 window, and it can be tucked up almost to the plate line. And then because there are bathroom windows, they can be obscured glass, something like a rain glass. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. So really, that's all I had to offer regarding that. The plans speak for themselves, and I really can't expand upon it any more than, you know, what you see visually. So.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate your additional.
Excuse me,
shedding light on this.
one more thing. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the other is speaking to the height. It is well under the 28 feet that's allowed. So it's, what is it, 25 feet, 3 inches. And currently the pitch is a 5 and 12, which I think looks better. But I'm happy to reduce the pitch to 4 and 12, which is the predominant pitch of roofs in the neighborhood, thereby reducing it a foot. So I wanted to offer all of those things so you can incorporate them into your thinking.
Thank you again. We appreciate your comments. Shall we move to Ms. Fisher if we still have her?
Asked her to unmute, so hopefully. Kim, if you can unmute you can speak. I've asked, yeah, I can't unmute her on this end anymore. So I can just ask her to unmute herself.
We're having trouble connecting with her.
Yeah, she was there for a minute, but a little delayed, so.
Scott, was it, did the applicant's biologist want to present or just be available for questions?
They're logged in this evening and available for questions. They don't have a presentation prepared. Just knowledge to share, so.
Well, what's the sense of commissioners? Are there questions for the biologist we'd like to double click on?
Well, I posed 2 questions through the chair. I posed 2 questions earlier, which is why do we test for hydric soils in the highest time of drought? And then I had a specific question around area number 4 and whether they tested for hydric soils there or not.
Yes, thank you for reminding us. Why don't we invite the biologist to comment on that?
Here, I'm gonna bring Julia and Bill in, and then you guys can begin to speak.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Great. The question, I'm sorry, Mr. Hernandez, why were hydric soils not tested at that potential wetland?
So you have, I'll ask a clarifying question a little more clearly. So we have a previous study that was done, I think going back to 2008, that this area 4, did you test for hydric soils in area 4? And did you test for hydric soils across the entire lot where you're building?
We did not in our delineation test for hydric soils in area 4. I'll have to refer to our delineation to look at the exact locations of the sample points. Looks like there are none in our delineation in the actual lot proposed for development by Mr. Stebbins. If you refer to figure 2, I believe in our report, or 1B, it shows the sample point locations.
Pulling it up. So you didn't test in area 4?
We did not. I dug a pit today and took some photos to share with one of our wetland specialists. Our biologist who did the wetland delineation, I apologize, she was not available to join us tonight. The photos I sent were inconclusive. It's difficult when you're not in the field without a Munsell soil sample book to compare photos of soil rather live with you wet the soil and smear it on the book actually. So the photos were inconclusive. I dug about 10 or 12 inches down. There was no moisture whatsoever. It was completely dry, but the wetland specialist I could get a hold of to show the photos of the pit I dug and what appeared to be the lowest point in that feature were at best inconclusive.
I see. Okay.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes, thank you. I also wanted to follow up. I visited the site today, in fact, this afternoon, and I provided in the context of email to staff more recently this afternoon, a copy of a photograph that showed amidst all of the brown dried area, there was a couple of smatterings of very green, lush grass that looked like it was not being subject to the dry conditions that you are describing at all. I know what those look like because that's what my lawn looks like. I don't water it, even though I live next to a riparian area, and it gets brown. This area is not irrigated, and yet in the middle of August, in the middle of a drought, we have this nice green growth, which suggests to me that if we were to look in that area, we might find the water table is quite high. And it may well be that that area is part of one of the wetlands that was delineated in 2008 or not, because we know that wetlands move around, they shift back and forth. But if the wetland biologist were here tonight, one of the questions that I would ask is if wetlands ebb and flow and we measure them when they have ebbed and the opportunity for the wetland to flow is limited because the buffer that would otherwise have protected its ability to do that has been restricted by development, how are we being effective protectors of that wetland resource? Does that question make sense?
It does. It does. And I did see your photo, and that is the reason I went out there today. That was alarming to see green grass growing in that area. As I said, our wetland expert was not available. I went out there, I took an awful lot of photos of all the vegetation and sent them while I was speaking to one of our wetland specialists. And the only wetland species that they saw was at the edge of that feature as it was mapped in all 3 reports, where you, I believe, saw the juncus that was mowed short, and there was a couple other wetland plants associated with that fringe. But he did not identify any wetland plants within that smaller sample point 4. That green
Yeah.
grass was not identifiable because it was not in flower, but it was a grass and not a wetland species.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just to be clear, the Juncus picture that I sent was a separate picture. That was from the channelized, that was from the reach of the channelized corridor that is east of the parcel that sort of flows diagonally north and to the west.
Right.
But the picture with the green grass is the area that I don't know if that was actually in area 4 or not. But as I understand, and again, you know, I'm not trying to pick on you here.
No, please.
My understanding is that while it may very well, I understand it would be difficult to tell whether there was a wetland obligate plant there because they wouldn't be flowering right now.
God.
Speaking to Commissioner Hernandez's earlier question. But
Right.
in the coastal zone, we have a 3-parameter definition of wetlands that describes wetland conditions even when there are no plants there. And as you pointed out, it's really hard to tell what the hydric soils you know, are present. Maybe they're present, maybe they're not. You know, I have seen instances elsewhere in this vicinity where there was clearly disturbance of the existing soil. I have no idea if that's the case on this parcel. I did notice a rather large amount of gravel sitting closer to the road that I have to admit I wondered about a little bit, but the green area was further back. I'm not even sure if that was area 4 or not. It might have been another area that wasn't seen in 2008. But my understanding is that the duty is for the applicant to provide evidence in support of the findings. So indeterminate or not consequential doesn't quite get me there. But I would like to understand, I appreciate that you are also alarmed. Alarm is the wrong word. It's nice to see habitat features, but I understand that you were anxious to reconcile that with the assessments that existed. And I wonder what you think is the best way for us to understand that in light of the information that we currently have available. We can discuss as a commission and staff about what we might want to do with that. But you know, you're the expert presenting tonight. So how would you have us interpret that green area?
Well, the green area was actually much larger than the mapped wetland feature, and our wetland expert identified that as an upland grass. Grasses are notoriously difficult to ID when they're not in flower. Given a little bit of time, he might be able to identify it to species. He was not currently, because I could not get any photos of it in flower. This soil pit I dug and showed him had absolutely no moisture. As I said, it was inconclusive. All biologists prefer to do wetland delineations end of winter and the springtime when plants are in flower. Back to Commissioner Hernandez's question, we can do delineations at various times of the year. It might require some forensic botany, meaning we can see the dried up plants. If they're dried up and still have flowers, they are usually identifiable. In this lot, there were a number of plants that had flowered and were desiccated that I took photos of that I sent to our specialist. And the only wetland plants he identified were, as I said, at that north fringe, which is mapped on our report, not in the buffer or not in the polygon identified as number 4. So the plants he could identify in that area were upland. And even though this area had been mowed, or looks like it's been repeatedly mowed through aerial photo interpretation, there were some flowering plants from this year that he could identify.
And I appreciate that you're playing a difficult hand here. So thank you for those answers. Let me turn now to the channelized riparian area.
Through the chair, if staff can just sum a couple things up before we move on to the riparian area, and then we also have some responses to the earlier questions about that.
Certainly.
I do want to be really clear about past studies that were involved in this, and Scott did present to this, but I think it's really important to note. Scott and I also went out in the field today. We've been at the property quite a few times, but we have gone out there and we saw Bill there as well. The 2008 study that has come to be of concern that included the 2006 field work that is, it's pretty old now. It cited this area 4 based on what we see the Coastal Commission Wetland Standard as a 1-parameter standard, not a 3-parameter standard. The Army Corps standard for wetlands is 3 parameters. You need to have wetness, hydric soils, and appropriate plants. The Coastal Commission standard of a 1-parameter standard of having the wet area plus and or hydric soils plus or the plants is the one that all of these studies were using. What concerns us about the 2008 report is that it cites this wetland feature number 4 based on hydric soils. The plants weren't there and they never took a soil sample. So we really struggle with that as a baseline piece. The 2015 study observed what our biologists here today observed, which was they didn't see the plant species. They took other samples of soils in other areas that were more likely to yield a hydric soil sample. What Scott and I saw today, and of course we are not biologists, but we saw the same grass that Commissioner Benjamin noted, and we really appreciated the photograph. But we saw that on other parts of the Upper Grandview Terrace area, in the upland section, on sites that were higher, that had no juncus, that had none of the things that we are used to seeing on our delineated wetlands. So I want to offer that because I think it's a really important context in terms of what the facts of the record include, as well as what our biologist team has gone out and they conducted. The BRE was prepared in the spring of 2020 during the wet season. The follow-up fieldwork for the delineation came later, but the biologists believed that they had adequate moisture to do that work. Now, what we think happened after that is that we had fuel load management activities, which mowed away some of the duff layer and perhaps stimulated or opened up some of this grass to sprout, because what it looks like is pretty fresh. So there's a lot of dynamics, not just with the history, but also with what's going on from time to time out in Grandview. That area does get, that mowing goes through. You can see it in historic aerials. This is not a first time. It's not a first occurrence. So we just note that we're familiar with the area. It's really interesting. We have some thoughts about what we can work on with our biologists, but we really don't have an area, that area 4 where the grass was. We're not even sure that it overlaps with that little section from that old Live Oak report. It looks like it's in a different location. And so it's just, there's a lot to it. Anyway, I did want to be clear in the record that this biologist was out there in the spring. It wasn't all late season work. They did quite a bit of field work. Did I miss anything in that part of the record?
There
I'm
is
sorry,
one thing that, through the chair, within the biological resource evaluation, the biologist did recommend that we prepare a wetland delineation. And the moment that I read that, we jumped on it and said, okay, yes, we absolutely need a new wetland delineation for this project. I got on the phone with Mr. Stebbins and explained this. And, we wanted to get it done as before too much time went by, with the wet season. So, and I think our colleagues at the coastal staff would have had the same recommendation that normally they ask for wetland delineation. So we get a good handle on our buffer requirements and where they exist, and to design projects with the buffer requirements in mind. So.
Can I just jump in for a second to clarify? I think I've heard things that make this a lot clearer for me. Soil samples were taken on the lot where development is proposed. Is that correct?
Not by biomass. We did not take soil samples on Mr. Stebbins' lot, the proposed development.
Okay. Did you take soil samples on, I can't find the page that you referenced. So you took samples in the areas where there were other wetlands that had been previously identified?
Yes, in the ditch to the east of Mr. Stebbins' lot and to the north in the intermittent stream and wetland areas and the willow thickets. It looks like there were 4 samples to the north and 2 to the east of the lot.
And those little, I see, the little areas that are marked off 1B, 1A, so.
Correct.
Okay. And so your biologist, who is professional biologist and an expert, went out during the spring and looked at this site and later conducted the wetland delineation in the summer, but your biologist had already been there in the spring to evaluate the site.
Right, I believe the spring visit was for the biological resources assessment, and the delineation was done, I believe it was July 2020.
Okay, so I'm a little concerned. I'll just put it out that, and we can come back to this during our discussion. I suppose that's the appropriate time to do that. But I think I'm satisfied with questions for now, from my perspective.
Through the chair, I wanted to get back to the riparian area if I could.
Yes, indeed, of course.
Thank you. So directing our attention to the channelized feature that sort of looks like the diagonal line, the hypotenuse of the square, where one side is the plan line for Grandview Avenue, and the second leg is the red line that's the eastern edge of the property. Sorry, the western edge of the property, my mistake. There's this diagonal drainage feature that 1A is pretty close to. And I know in our existing zoning ordinance, we have language that defines riparian corridors as requiring 50% of a particular mix of vegetation. Our revised LCP has a different standard. And I'm trying, my understanding from reading the report is that you found juncus and some other riparian plants in that corridor. And the conclusion was that it had some riparian features, but it was an intermittent stream, and it saw, I think, a setback, sorry, setback's the wrong word, a buffer of 30 feet from the center line of the stream. Am I understanding that correctly?
I believe so, yes. I have to refer back to the delineation report as far as the requirements.
I understand. So Scott, my question to you is I'm now looking in our new, boy, you can't really see it with my funny screen here, but I'm holding up my blue book. That's the ghost that's showing up beside me from time to time here. And I'm looking at policy 6 dash, I guess it's 6-49, that talks about 35 feet from the outer limits of riparian vegetation or top of bank, whichever is greater. That's in part B of this policy. And I'm wondering why that isn't the appropriate buffer for this.
So, you know, that can easily be updated. I think the short answer is that no development is proposed within 35 feet of the drainage feature. So, you know, I think for this particular project, the critical item is the wetland buffer, since it does clip the northeastern corner. But I think you're right. I think, you know, under certain circumstances, the riparian buffer requirements within our new land use plan are more restrictive than what's included in the zoning ordinance.
Okay,
So
so we're all on the same page here, and I'm not, this isn't a gotcha kind of thing, right? We're trying to work through these things and get familiar with it. So in some ways, this is me testing my understanding, probably even more than yours.
As a side note, it's, you know, from a staff's perspective, it's kind of fun for the, you know, to have some new requirements to kind of learn and get used to, and we're all having fun with that. So,
Right. Okay, and I had one other question, but it's not biologically related. I know that will be very refreshing for most of us, but if other people wanted to talk about biology, I should step back and then I'll turn to the driveway.
Yeah, I think while we have the biologists here, if there are further questions, feel free to raise your hand and ask them. If not, I do want to make sure we don't forget Ms. Fisher is still part of the public hearing.
if you don't mind,
Scott, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify that my understanding is that riparian plants were not identified within the biological resource evaluation. But the 35-foot buffer would still apply.
So again, I was reading the BRE, and I looked at, there were several tables in that listed plans. There's one on page 177 of the staff report. There's one on page 243 of the staff report, and they described plants at different locations within the study area. They mentioned juncus. My intuition is that's unlikely to have been found outside of the riparian area unless it was in another wetland. The picture I took, and I think I forwarded, I'm not sure. I actually took a picture of it, of what I believe is juncus, right at the point where that diagonal feature leaves the extension of Grandview Boulevard and heads to the north and west. So there is certainly some vegetation that I would characterize as riparian in that corridor. If I just looked at the little corner of the parcel where it intersects with the riparian, this intermittent drainage, whatever we should call it, you know, I didn't look there, so I can't say that there was or wasn't juncus, but it exists elsewhere in that channelized feature for sure. Through the chair, I didn't mean to, that wasn't my intention to be argumentative. It was just to get the data on the record.
So
Yeah, we understand.
through the chair, we will confirm how that was classified, but the updated land use plan also includes watercourse buffers for non-riparian features. And in that case, it's 20 feet. If the existing code is more strict, then we're using the more strict code at this point in time. And at some point, these things will align. So we are using both books, and we'll be doing that we'll always be doing that, but hopefully they will have fully aligned numbers at some point in time once we get to the implementation.
I did read that with interest, and I noticed that the description was to facilitate meander belts in the text, which made me wonder if we shouldn't be calling it a setback instead of a buffer.
I'm not familiar with that.
I'll send you the
Yeah.
one I found. There might be more.
Okay, the non-riparian watercourse buffer is really meant to help us deal with ditches, human-made ditches that were introduced into the landscape to deal with drainage and that have not resulted in creation of different kinds of habitat types. So we still care about them, even though they are not ESHA, and the intent is to support water quality and have a buffer for safety purposes, as well as even the off chance that that particular feature could end up being supportive to dispersal species or other types of habitat in the future.
This is policy 6-53 you're looking at, is that right?
That is right.
Yeah, so I was just looking at text below that identifies it as space for potential meander belt and natural erosion and flooding hazard. But I'm with you for the development as well as, for the habitat enhancement as well as the safety issue. Sometimes buffer and setbacks might be magic words, and I want to be sure we get either or both as appropriate. Or are you going to embarrass me and tell me I'm looking at an outdated version? I promise I threw all those out. Oh no.
You might be, or I can't read fast enough. It's one of us is not on the same page. We'll work that out later.
Very good.
Okay. Let us.
Pam still has her hand up, Chair.
And she's unmuted.
Ms. Fisher, we'd be happy to hear your comments.
Thank you.
Oops. Oh no.
Now you're muted again, Ms. Fisher.
Pam.
No,
There
it
you go.
says it's coming from the host, that the
Okay,
host muted me.
You're good.
Anyway.
You're good.
Okay, all right, let's hope this goes through. Basically, I was surprised that I did not see on the Planning Commission agenda for this evening the discussion that the neighbors in CUSD are having about the CDP, the lighting CDP that we all attended on 5/19. The result of that meeting.
Yeah, you're correct. It's not on our agenda.
Right, I know, this is public comment, and so I would just like to ask.
No, this is not open public comment.
No, I know I was late because of all the technical difficulties. So I don't know what else to do to get this request to you to get it on your agenda.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
Can I recommend that we move public comment, open up public comment at the end of this hearing item?
I'll be happy to hold on. Yeah, I would love it. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I am trying to deal with a new internet system. Anyway, so I'd be very happy to wait through. It's been an interesting discussion and project.
Yeah, I think that's a constructive idea. Why don't we close the public hearing for now, and we will reopen it at the end of the consideration of our agenda items. Thank you for your patience. Do staff have any other things you'd like to share before we move to Planning Commission deliberation?
Only that I confirmed Commissioner Benjamin's meander belt sentence. I found it. Thank you.
Good. Well done. Oh, how would the commissioners like to take up deliberation on this item? Who's got points of view to share? Commissioner Benjamin, please.
So I want to wade in very gently because as I said, we're all in this together and we're trying to find our way. I appreciate the suggestion by the applicant with respect to addressing floor area lot coverage types of issues. And I understood his position with respect to height. I thought staff's explanation with respect to the setback was clear and helpful. I note that the public comment that we received suggested that they felt it was quite close. And I think that was probably a perception based on the bulk of the building and the perceived shortness of the distance relative to the sizes, without meaning any disrespect to the effort to soften the massing with all of the articulation of facades that the applicant mentioned. But I think that the details of that revision probably need to be reviewed, and we need to have another look at it with those changes. I appreciate the staff response to the email that I sent last night. I'm a little concerned because I'm not sure that the nuance of some of the questions came through. It would be helpful for me if the actual document that I sent could become part of the public record. Commissioner Gorn and I have had an opportunity to discuss this item, and until the items that we've discussed are in the public record, I feel like we haven't discharged our duties properly. I do appreciate that figure from the PDP 00507 is now in the public record, thanks to Scott putting it in the agenda report. Of course, it was in the public record, but now it's part of all commissioners' consideration on this item. And I sympathize with Commissioner Hernandez's position that it's difficult to assess the flowering part of wetland standards during the summer. I sympathize and I understand staff's position, of course, that they can only move as fast as they can move. And that presents a different challenge. If the crux of the issue is hydric soils, I'm not sure how much hydric soils change. My very layman-oriented understanding is that they take a long time to develop, and unless they are disturbed, they take a long time to go away, and that they can be seen, even under dry conditions. I understand that mowing could stimulate the fresh growth of grass. My understanding is that green grass requires photosynthesis, and photosynthesis requires water. So my intuition is that if we looked carefully at those green areas, they may feel dry, but at least at the time they were growing, there was water there. Maybe they're not growing anymore, I don't know. But I feel like I'm missing some evidence with respect to where the buffers around wetlands really needs to be. And in particular, the present location of the wetlands is only part of the assessment. As I struggled not to say in my questioning, wetlands are dynamic features. They ebb and flow. And when they ebb, if we use that moment to define the buffer, we lose the opportunity for them to return because they won't have a good buffer after that. And so what I understand our LCP is trying to do is to foster these systems in such a way that they can achieve their biologic productivity and deliver the water quality improvements and habitat values and absorb water that could potentially be a source of floodwaters at some point in the future. So there's a lot of water quality services that are provided by wetlands, as we know. At the same time, I'm very respectful of the applicant's property rights, and no one is suggesting, I think, that this project, that there's, this is in a residentially zoned area. A home should be buildable in this location. The question is, under what circumstances? And even if we found that the buffer needs to be moved further to the south and to the east, we certainly need to consider what the ramifications for development would be, and if needed, make some kind of appropriate adjustments. But that's a counterfactual hypothetical, or at least an indeterminate hypothetical right now. And I don't want to go there, but I do feel like we need some more information. So for the opportunity to be sure the public record is current, so that Commissioner Gorn and I have a good conscience, and to provide the additional insights we need with respect to how to take care of the wetlands wherever they're located and wherever they're likely to ebb and flow to, it feels to me like there's a need for some additional data. So I'm inclined to make a list of questions and then put them up on a chalkboard and continue this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Benjamin. Other commissioners? Commissioner Hernandez.
I'm amenable to the changes that the designer has proposed for this project. I'm glad to see that the applicant is responding to the feedback from the neighbors who are concerned about the scale and the mass and the perceived mass of the project. So I'm very pleased to see these proposed changes to the project. I will say the overall, looking at two projects that are immediately adjacent to this project, the height of the house proposed project relative to the ground is pretty similar to adjacent projects. So just doing a Google Street View and eyeballing it, it doesn't seem like what's being built is out of scale. It is probably true that I've been to that area, it might be on higher ground, and so the perceived size of the house is larger, but it doesn't seem out of order. I would like to, if we are going to continue this item, I would like city staff to just, more than eyeball it, look at it and give us feedback on the scale of the project, just to make sure that it's conforming with, the general feel of that neighborhood. But I think the changes, regardless, the changes that are proposed by the designer, I think would address the biggest concerns that many of the neighbors have. I mean, the applicant has a right to build a project there, and it's going to change the view, and that's what happens. We lose our views when people build in buildable lots. So that's what happens. I feel like many of my concerns around the adequacy of the biological assessment have been addressed. I do feel like there are a couple of open boxes that need to be ticked off and addressed. And so I'm not as deeply concerned as Commissioner Benjamin, but I would like to make sure that, we just do the right thing the right way, just tick off all the boxes and go through proper process, make sure we've addressed the questions around the soil and this project, and make sure that we've done this the appropriate way, because we can't unbuild the house once it's built. So I just would like to make sure that, we move forward. Again, the design itself, I'm pleased with the design. It's consistent with the neighborhood. It is an attractive design. It just seems like a good design. And we just have some questions around scale and scope, which have already been addressed by the designer. And then, from my perspective, just making sure we dot the i's and cross the t's in the biological assessment.
Thank you for that, Rick. Commissioner Gorn, please.
Hey there. So I had two, relatively minor concerns, and one of them was height. When you looked at it, looked out of proportion to the neighborhood. The applicant's, willingness to change it. I don't, that's more for him to work out with the city and with Architectural Review Board. It's not something that I feel strongly about, but I do think that it looks bigger than everybody else. So I just think it should be addressed in some way, but not by me. So, and then the other thing is that this footprint is right up against the buffer zone. I mean, the buffer cuts into it, and it cuts off the road and it cuts off the sidewalk. And so that's fine all by itself. But if there are some questions about where that buffer zone really should be, then I think we should just answer those. When you stand there and look at the vegetation near there, the mowing that's gone on, and the sort of the lower, it's clear that there's a lower area that's maybe a little wetter than everything else. I don't know if that means wetlands or not, but it would be nice to have one more look at it by a biologist and make sure that that we're accurate. So, especially when it's so close. But that's all. I mean, I think it's a project that seems very close to me.
So thank you, Commissioner Gorn. When I visited that spot the other day to look at the story poles, it is vivid that the story poles and the house to the west would be quite close together, the minimum of what the setbacks are required by zoning. But I didn't, as I drove around the neighborhood, I saw several or maybe even many examples where that neighborhood has been built with in many cases, two houses next to each other with the bare minimum of setback between them. So I didn't feel that either in height or in setback that this proposed project doesn't fit with the character of the neighborhood. I very much appreciate the applicant's willingness to take into account the feedback from the neighbors and consider changes that would make the project more palatable. One thing, especially given that that's going to be this project would be, of course, quite close to the existing house at 905 Grandview. I would be concerned about the windows on the west side of the new house. I'd really encourage us to look at what reasonable limitations could be put into place to guarantee privacy or to maximize privacy. and because a fair amount of changes were discussed having to do with windows and the height and the setback, and also because I'm very supportive of Commissioner Benjamin's desire to make his observations and questions he posed earlier in the process part of the public record. I'd be supportive of hopefully a relatively short continuation to deal with those issues. Commissioner Benjamin. You have to unmute, Jimmy, please.
Thank you very much. And I want to reiterate my thanks to the applicant for their openness to respond to the concerns of the neighbors. After doing this for a while, I think all of you know that when you see the give and take that happens in a productive way like this, it augurs a good relationship. And in some ways, that's at least as important as everything else that we do. So, Mr. Stebbins, thank you for that. There was one other question that was not biologically related I promised to get to, and that was the driveway. I am interested in, Scott, given how close this is, whether the driveway is located in an optimal position. It feels like he has to get pretty far east before he makes the turn into the driveway. And I wonder if there's room to bring it a little bit further to the west, or if that's encroaching in a way that's impermissible. I know we're really shifting gears here, but since we're making a laundry list, and I did mention that I was going to go there, I said I'd go there.
So in order to do so, a bend in the driveway would need to be added, which would be slightly awkward. You know, I think it would require some sort of modification to the design in order to really shift the
I'm not going to lose sleep.
garage.
Maybe after all of the other, when the other changes are incorporated, maybe the right thing for me to do is to ask that it be considered. I'm not trying to lay down some law here, but I'd like to get some clarity, if I can, to whether we're making the best use for entrance and egress. You know, I confess that I'm still slightly mystified that the fire department is great with this, but if they're great with it, that's good enough for me.
Good, thank you, Commissioner Benjamin.
I also mentioned the possibility of a permanent monument. Has anybody had any thoughts about whether that's a good idea or a bad idea?
I have to admit that all of our discussion of the ebbing and flowing of wetlands made me pause and wonder how the monument keeps track of the ebbing and flowing.
Well, so
I'm sorry, that's slightly frivolous, but
no, not at all. I think that's a fair question. I have the same one, actually. I encountered this when I was in Rockport, Massachusetts, actually. And I think what they're saying is the wetlands may come and go, but if they posted it to create a buffer that protects the wetland at its flow point, then even if it ebbs back, it doesn't lose the ability to flow back. That's the notion that it was described to me for why it is so marked.
good point, good point. Well, maybe that should be added to the list of things for our very capable staff to consider.
I would be amenable to that.
Any further discussion from commissioners? I have the sense that we're leaning towards a motion to continue this.
So my only question to staff is whether they would like a date or they would like a date uncertain. And maybe we should go through the things that are on the list to think through.
What's most helpful to staff?
Well, probably the item that requires more of a potential time constraint is additional biological analysis. So we're curious to know from the biologists, you know, a time frame that would be needed on that. So.
Yeah, if that's the kind of thing that the biologist can give an off the cuff answer to, would be happy to hear it now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I will have to check. I don't want to disturb our staff at 9 o'clock at night, but Scott, I can get back to you tomorrow morning.
So that is completely fair, Bill, and to the chair. I would recommend at this point that it's in the best interest to continue to a date uncertain to allow us the right amount of time that we need with our biologists, but to also reassure our applicant that the commission wishes to have this return to the commission as soon as possible. I will note that when we continue to a date uncertain, the thing that's really good about that is the public interest is served well because we renotice the item. It is, of course, more work for us. We love to continue to a date certain because we can check box A, B, and C really quickly and bring it right back to you. But in this case, I don't think that's reasonable to jump to that conclusion tonight. So we'd like to do that. And because you did get some comments from neighbors, having another notice is a good thing.
That's a good point. Thank you, Jill.
So through the chair, I noticed that there is a raised hand.
Yeah, the applicant.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Stebbins, we'd be happy to listen to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the concern about the driveway, and there is a limitation moving it to the west as all the utilities are in a very narrow section there. All the underground is there. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. How much it can be moved, I'm not sure, but it is problematic because you know, the water, two of them, fire and domestic service, the PG&E and the sewer are all kind of bunched up in a 7 feet wide section. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And whatever I can move the driveway, I'm happy to do so. But at some point, you know, I'll hit a stop with those utilities that are there.
Thank you, Mr. Stebbins.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for that. And thank you on behalf of the commission for your constructive and positive attitude towards all this tonight.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So if
Mr.
you're
Benjamin?
prepared, thank you. If you're prepared for a motion, I move that we continue this item to a date uncertain to give staff an opportunity to address the questions and requests for additional information that have been raised, to provide recommendations with respect to the location of the buffer in light of the answers to those questions, clarification on the whether it would be appropriate to have a permanent marker, and if so, where, the location of the driveway, revised plans to reflect the proposed changes that have been so graciously put forward by the applicant. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
I think that's a good list.
I second the motion.
Thank you.
And vote is Commissioner Benjamin,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorn,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
and Chair Reddick.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Well, in the interests of being inclusive in taking a public comment, if Ms. Fisher is still wishing to make general public comment, I would be happy to reopen that portion of the meeting.
Ms. Fisher would appreciate it. Thank
All right.
you.
Public
All right.
hearing opened.
Okay. I just wanted to address the project that arose out of the lighting CDP for CUSD. It appears there has been somewhat of a comedy of errors, and Jill knows that, and she even expressed to us that she knew we wouldn't want to be planting redwoods to buffer our homes, that they are slow growing and not coastal vegetation. They're found inland, up at altitude, etc. However, the project talking about it was about 4 lines in the original lighting CDP that mentioned removing dead or dying vegetation. And that then somehow turned into a project that involved severely pruning or removing 81 trees. I don't understand how this didn't require a new CDP on that specific part of the project. I think that the height variance that was granted on this for 2 of the towers also puts at risk some issues with the Coastal Commission, in that the lights were visible on the sand before the height variance was allowed. We have no idea at this point, because no lights have been turned on the impact of this tremendous removal of living plants and trees, serving as no longer a buffer, but a screen behind Highland Park homes. There is no buffer anymore. And so not only is there no buffer, but the screen has also been compromised. So we are looking for first of all, those neighbors who attended the meeting on, the original meeting on the lighting CDP, which was in 2019, all left that meeting feeling assured that the Coastal Commission absolutely was looking to protect our homes. And there was a provision made for an intact buffer to hide the AT&T pole. There was a great deal of discussion on that issue. And I also believe CUSD should have in June begun a new coastal development permit for the for moving that AT&T pole. So the bottom line is we are in desperate need of these issues being brought back to you with photographic evidence, with expert testimony on what grows on the coast, although you can ride down Highway 1 and see what trees you see. They are Monterey cypresses, not redwoods. That came out of an agreement on a settlement with, because we allowed the school to move the baseball field further away from the flooded zone that it was $1 million field was put in on because the proper EIR wasn't done. At any rate, the gardener at the end of the street suggested redwoods because he was really getting undue pressure from a staff member at CUD who demanded an answer within 24 hours. There is not one neighbor in Highland Park who wishes to have redwoods planted. We have great photographic evidence of what grows well in the coastal zone. And so we're just not happy with this going on. We think there are many issues that need to be discussed with the Planning Commission. And we want to be successful in creating a good relationship with CUSD, but we've kind of hit a wall. Anyway, I would appreciate you getting this on your agenda so we may address the many issues. It was like a comedy of errors suggesting redwoods. No, we haven't. And Jill is absolutely right. She knew we wouldn't have, had suggested that. Anyway, thank you for your time. Sorry for my technical difficulties. I'll try to do better next time. But we really need this to show up on your agenda so we may have a public discussion about what's going on.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Thank you for your patience tonight.
No problem.
I think that brings us to the point in our agenda for director's report.
Thank you, Chair. I just need a moment to
Sure.
recover where I was. I apologize.
Yeah. Is everyone okay with forging ahead at this hour?
This won't take too long. There we are. Okay. Hi, it's nice to see you all. I have missed a little bit of time and we apologize for the prior cancellation. That was an agreed upon result of meeting with the applicant for the Wave Crest Trail Extension Project, and we're looking forward to bringing that back to you at an appropriate time. For your agenda forecast, your next meeting will be bringing back, this is Scott's project, it's 341 Myrtle Street. This is an application for a single-family home on a severely substandard lot. The commission had some input about that on working through design revisions. We've been working on that with the applicant. We've also used the Architectural Advisory Committee, and we look forward to bringing you a staff recommendation related to the input that you gave to staff. Also that evening, 880 Stone Pine is the city's recently acquired courtyard site. That is where the courtyard is currently located, and we were a tenant of the Peninsula Open Space Trust. The city has now acquired the property and is working to make some improvements to it. And we thought it would be in the best interest of the commission, because you will see an environmental review document as well as the coastal development permit, and also in the best interest of our community, who we would like to send, we'll be sending notices to for this, that you have a study session before this comes to you for hearing, similar to what we did with Carter Park. It was really helpful to have public comment before we got to the hearing, and as well as the commission's discussion around it. And we look forward to having you see preliminary plans that are in for environmental review right now. And while we still have time to make adjustments on this really important project. So you have a big August 24th meeting. I don't have September slated yet. There's just a lot on our whiteboard that we're trying to move forward, and we'll keep you posted. Of note, the next city council meeting is Tuesday next week. They will see two projects that you've worked on. They will have the second reading of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. We talked about that ordinance a little bit tonight. They will have the first reading of the short-term rental ordinance, and we are trying to notice that as much as we can. So if you know of anybody who's interested in that item, please send them to that city council meeting on August 17th. It will be in Zoom format, and we're looking forward to continuing to move that through. We've been coordinating with Coastal Commission staff as we move forward with that. Tomorrow, I have an administrative review of an accessory dwelling unit. It's a garage conversion that conforms to state ADU law at 344 Kelly. We will continue to hold our Zoom conference rooms just to make sure that we are able to collect people's comments. City Hall is now open Monday through Thursday, but the mask mandate has been reinstated. And we've noticed since that happened that less people are already, we're just not getting as many people in the door again. So we know that people remain really concerned. And so we want to continue to provide more than one forum for those kinds of encounters so that they can get all the information they want. Speaking of which is the Architectural Advisory Committee. Their next meeting is on the 19th. It's next week, Thursday morning at 8:30. We are going to try a hybrid meeting with the Architectural Advisory Committee. They meet in the South Day room. They will come. We believe they still want to come in person. Staff will be there in person. We have a big room. It's ventilated. We will wear our masks, but we will also be able to have a screen with a speaker and microphone so that if anyone wants to attend in that format, they can. Hybrid meetings for the City Council and the Planning Commission are more complex than what we're proposing to do with our Architectural Advisory Committee. We've already been having staff meetings in the same hybrid format, and they work really well. So we think that works with this particular group, and we'll see how that goes. Speaking of their meeting, they will see a second review of a facade upgrade for a mixed-use building at 727 Main Street. This is a project that you will see for a coastal development permit later. And then 230 Cabrillo Highway is formerly the Coastside Inn. It is now called the Coast House. It is owned by San Mateo County, who has brought in Life Moves to operate this facility as a shelter. And through an MOU between the county and the county is having the city conduct design review for various improvements that are being proposed for the property. And in this case, we're looking at landscaping and some fencing to improve the frontage and to help the operator deal with some really kind of aged in place old hedging and other things that are hard for them to take care of. So we really appreciate the county's working with us on looking to a nicer looking front for that property. And they're actually taking a plant list from some of the city's median projects as a guide to try to have really rugged coastal native species that will fit in as much as possible. So it looks like it was really kind of lived in a half a day context. Just other things of note, the Highway 1 South project is nearing completion. We are eager to hear the date for the ribbon cutting, and you of course will hear about that as that will be broadly announced, and we hope to see some of you there. We're very excited about it. We're assuming that we won't be meeting in person with the Planning Commission now that the mask mandate has come back for interior spaces. But that said, we're happy to talk to you about it. A couple months ago, I know Chair Reddick and I were eager to transition us back into the good old days, and we just think it's a little too early, at least staff does, and based on how we're seeing our community members interacting with these different forums. And the final item is we're really trying to plan a reception to acknowledge and celebrate the certification of the land use plan. We wanted to do it in August. We are now looking at September dates, and we will keep you posted about that. Most likely Thursday, right after work looks good to us, 5 p.m. reception, and we would like to use the library outdoor space. They have a really flexible indoor-outdoor courtyard community room space that would feel good for a reception like that and be really lovely. So those are the highlights. I do want to note, and we don't want you to have to get into this, but you've had a public comment tonight about the Cabrillo Union High School or school district's lighting project at the high school site and conditions of approval associated with tree replacements. And I just want to reassure you that staff has been meeting with the neighbors and with the school district staff. I personally had an hour-and-a-half meeting last Friday afternoon with some of the neighbors and looked at it from their home. I've been on the site, I've been on both sides of this area, and nothing's been approved yet. And I would hope that we can continue with the condition of approval, which gives us some leeway to look for things in the field and have a director confirmation of the planting plan. And so it's not done, and we're making some good progress, and I will try to get some time with your speaker tonight because I haven't had a chance to talk to her for a couple of weeks. So I will do that. And that's all I have. Thank you. If you have questions, of course, let us know.
That's all you have, huh? That's a lot. You folks are awfully busy as always, I know. We appreciate that summary, Jill. Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you. So one item that is not on your plate, but it might be of interest to our colleagues is the workshop on electrification that's coming up on the 12th, just 2 short days from now. And to me, that although that doesn't show up as a planning item, it is at its heart a planning item, because it's about dealing with our greenhouse gases and what kind of infrastructure we think we need in place in the future. And I certainly plan to attend. I don't know, and I intend to participate because I am concerned about understanding our ability as citizens and as a community to have backup power in the event of different types of power shutdowns or other kinds of failures. And I invite you to join me. I'll try, if I don't see anyone there, I'll try to put an email out. It is not something that I think is reasonably foreseeable to show up as an agenda item in the near term. Unless you think otherwise, Winter, I'll just send a note saying this is what I heard, and that way you'll have that perspective. In visiting the area that was the subject of tonight's CDP public hearing, I walked back into the area of Pacific Ridge in the area that has been deed restricted to limit development. And I reported to Jill, and she was as surprised as I was, I think, to see that there had been some additional development on the fence on the east side of the border between, I don't think it's Pacific Ridge, it's the other one. Anyway, on the western edge of the Pacific Ridge site, there appears to be some new development. So I'll probably be filing some kind of complaint if I need to, or staff is probably still looking into it. But if you,
let me confirm, we think it has to do with the grazing operation there, and which is part of their habitat management plan, but we will give you an update about that. And we looked at it today as well, so we appreciate Commissioner Benjamin giving us that photograph, which was where I was surprised, but that's what we think it. That's what we think.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion about what with the appropriateness or whatever. Consistency with that CDP is important to me. Otherwise, I do think that I appreciate that to the item that the speaker addressed and that Jill responded to. I'm glad that there's a conversation taking place. As I recall, there is going to be a new CDP for the AT&T antenna coming up at CUSD at some point. I think it may be. I think they had a deadline to apply for it. I'm not exactly sure when, but if it turns out that it would be useful, as I think the speaker thought it might be, that might provide a venue for thinking about having a conversation if it's needed. We certainly have study sessions on many other kinds of items. I realize that the nexus with the antenna is just that the prior application involved both the lighting and the antenna. But it seems like an opportunity. And I want to give the process a chance to work. I want to give the homeowners an opportunity to feel like they have been heard as well if they don't. And so I'm open to finding a venue here to have a conversation about the evolution of that coastal development permit, but not before staff has had that opportunity that they asked for to work through that process. Somewhere between that and when irrevocable decisions have been made about allocating resources, it would be, I think, worthwhile to at least consider the possibility of whether a discussion is needed. I don't know if any of my fellow commissioners feel that way, but as I understand from the bylaws, we need to ask for that flexibility. So this is me saying I think we might want to have it. That's it. Oh, just a reminder that I am still scheduled to be out for the first meeting in September. The North Rim still beckons. Delta variant concerns me, but I haven't quite gotten to canceling it yet. But just a reminder of that, and I'll miss you guys. I'll be thinking of you from the northward. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Commissioner Benjamin, for all that. Commissioner Gorn.
Hey, you left off the first day of school. Tomorrow, day after tomorrow. It's a big day in our household.
Back to school. Commissioner Hernandez.
It is back to school for Cabrillo the day after tomorrow, and we will be having our junior excited to go back to school. I want to comment on Cabrillo more generally, not on specific items that have been brought up before, because this isn't a hearing item. I will say that a lot of people want to dunk on Cabrillo to score points. I will say that's unfortunate, but I feel like Cabrillo has actually surprised me with what they've done at Hatch and Cunha with respect to trees and the tree plans. There were some concerns way back when about inappropriate pruning of trees. And the plan they've brought forth and implemented far exceeds my expectations on what could have been done, what I thought would have been done there, at both of those sites. So I think they've done a really good job of restoring trees and improving the landscaping for both of those projects over the years. So I do think there is a strong sense of partnership with the school district, and I think we need to build on that. I know there's work going on right now to build community volleyball courts with the school district that the city's working on. And what I would like to see, given some of the comments around Cabrillo, one of the things we have in our land use plan is a proposal to put trails that connect the communities of Highland Terrace and Frenchman's Creek to the school. And I would like to see something in the near term that looks at what can we do to improve pedestrian access at the eastern end of those developments, so we can make it easier for our kids who bike and walk to school to get there without having to take a car. And having walked Pacific Ridge and walked around that area, there's some pretty easy things that could be done without a lot of hoo-ha. I would love to see what we can do to just make it easy for our kids to get to school without having to drive. And that's already part of our LUP. So at some point, when it's appropriate, it's my request to see if we can put that as an agendized item.
Thank you for that. Good food for thought. Any other commissioners' communications? No? Shall we call it a day then?
I make a motion to conclude our meeting.
Commissioner Benjamin has seconded it.
I hope that's not the rude version.
This is the one you want. That's the one you want.
Thank you.
Commissioner Benjamin,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorn,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
and Chair Reddick.
Yes.
Motion approved. You may
Meeting
adjourn.
adjourned, folks. Thank you, everybody. Be
Bye.
well.
You too.